It's 2020, which means the U.S. Census Bureau will tally up the U.S. population. The census was the topic of conversation at the Robbins Library this week. Why do we need an accurate count taken every 10 years? And how safe is it? We spotted a nest of majestic bald eagles in Arlington this week. Just how plentiful is this marvelous creature in these parts? And what can we all do to make sure they stick around? We talked to Arlington's animal control officer. We'll bring you up to date on the proposed Heights pub that may inhabit the old Balich 5 and 10 building in Arlington Heights. Some issues were raised at a zoning board of appeals hearing this week. We'll tell you where things stand tonight. And 56 years ago, a Liverpudlian band came to our shores. And let's face it, we haven't been the same since. We'll tell you about a one-of-a-kind Beatles show coming to the Regent Theatre. And we talked to a man who was fortunate enough to tour with John, Paul, George, and Ringo way back when in 1964.
From McLennan Park to Spy Pond, from Poets Corner to the Mystic River, we have Arlington covered. We're your neighbors, a friend you can turn to. This is ACMi News.
It was a jam-packed Lions hearing room at a zoning board of appeals meeting this week. At issue, bringing a new sit-down restaurant pub to the old Balich Building on Mass Ave. Hello, I'm Anim Osmani.
And I'm James Milan. The potential pub owner ran into a snag at the hearing when a memorandum was presented to the board just prior to the meeting that gave potential pub owner Jim O'Rourke little time to respond. Because parking is a main concern for the proposed new business, O'Rourke must now address issues like soil conditions and topography. O'Rourke, who owns the first house pub in nearby Winchester, tells us he has to prove that the potential Heights pub can provide at least 16 to 17 parking spots for the business. O'Rourke says the Arlington Coal and Lumber Company already granted 4 parking spots for pub employees at night, and the landlord will be renting 2 spots in the back of the old Balich building. The ZBA could grant a variance allowing the pub to operate without parking, but the state would have to sign off on that. Since many Heights businesses are not open late, O'Rourke says parking for the new business should not be a major problem.
Yes, a lot of the businesses are only open till 5 or 6, so I don't see it a problem with people getting parking spots, or, I'm hoping a lot of people will be walking down from the neighborhood. So I think we won't need all 17 spots at one time, but I don't see it being a problem.
Why is it so important for you? You're a native of Arlington Heights. Why is it so important to you to maybe get an establishment like this? I mean, this is a pretty nice, cozy place, a nice place for locals to meet, have a drink, sit, kick back, and relax. Why is it so important for you to get something going in Arlington? Just growing up in that area, I knew that there was an opportunity and a need for that area, that neighborhood, for people to have a spot to gather, come down to have a sit-down lunch or dinner. We are family friendly, and just be able to go have a couple beers with the guys locally.
The next board meeting on this matter is now set for February 25th. O'Rourke says that'll give him the time he needs to respond to the parking concerns. An overwhelming majority of the people attending the ZBA meeting said that they favor a new pub occupying what is now a dormant piece of real estate. Every 10 years, the U.S. Census Bureau undertakes a mammoth task, tallying the number of people living in the U.S. and recording basic information like age, sex, and race. Counting our population was so important to our founding fathers that it's mandated in our Constitution. Questions about our census tally were addressed at the Robbins Library this week, where roughly 40 people attended the latest event in the Democracy After Dark series, the 2020 census. The census goes far beyond tallying the U.S. population. I had the privilege of moderating this panel discussion where we discussed why the census is necessary, both to get a handle on where we are now as Americans and where we are headed in the future.
Well, there's a few reasons why it's critically important that we get the census right every 10 years. I think the first reason is to make sure that we get the representation we deserve. The census data are used to set the districts across the country, so we need to make sure that we retain our congressional representation. That's number one. Number two, that same information is used to draw municipal and state political districts and boundaries, and we want to make sure that our representatives reflect the communities that we come from. And finally, it's the basic basis for a whole lot of decisions about how to allocate funds, identify needs, and to allocate federal resources. And so I think the stakes are extremely high for the Commonwealth and for Arlington and for all of our communities here in Massachusetts, and it's worth making an extra effort to make sure that everyone is counted.
This is no secret to you. I'm sure a lot of people come up to you and say, hey, it's kind of like an invasion of my privacy. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think certainly people have concerns about that, but the census information is protected by federal law under Title 13. It's a jailable act to misuse or to use that data in an inappropriate way. I think given all the information that is already out there about us, that we volunteer through social media, that we share with the government through our tax returns or through our driving records and et cetera, that it's not too much to ask, and I think there's a whole lot to be gained. And so I think people should have legitimate concerns, but I think there are great steps that are taken to make sure that none of that information will be misused.
For an accurate tally, Goodman tells us that we need to have faith in our community, colleagues, and government leaders, because the price of not getting it right is just too high. If you'd like to become a census taker, which can pay roughly $27 an hour, you can apply online at 2020census.gov/jobs.
Our national symbol is once again thriving in the Arlington area and surrounding communities. With a little patience and a keen eye, you can spot the once endangered bald eagle near the upper and lower Mystic Lakes. Just because this intensely powerful bird of prey is making a comeback, there are a few tips we can all follow to make sure they stick around here for generations to come. I recently went to an undisclosed location with Arlington's animal control officer to find out how.
The bald eagle, with its distinctive brown body and white head and tail, is among the most majestic birds on the planet. They are the very symbol of a nation, and they can stop anyone in their tracks at the very sight of one.
I've been amazed myself at how many times, even just driving down Mass Ave, I see them flying over. And people will often send photographs, or they're on top of the police station or the fire station or one of the church steeples, and they're seen out and about town quite often. So we're so blessed and lucky, I think, because of the beautiful waterways and green spaces that we have in Arlington.
Walsh says the population count of the Bay State's largest bird of prey is once again on the rise, and fortunately, that includes the Arlington area, where we found this fortified nest high in the treetops. But experts say these awesome creatures are not out of the woods yet.
When I was younger, we didn't see bald eagles. We didn't see many birds of prey, and that was because of DDT, which was a pesticide. And because it was so effective, every farm, every farmer, agricultural industry used it. But what they didn't know, the problem with DDT, aside that it was very effective, was that it went up through the food chain. So through the insects, all of the animals, other insects that ate insects, animals that ate those insects, and up through the food chain. And with birds of prey being at the top of the food chain, the effects on them that nobody could foresee was that when they laid their eggs, they were paper thin, very delicate. So when the parents sat on the eggs to incubate them, all of the eggs broke.
These majestic animals are usually found in the coastal regions of North America, and the inlanders would usually be found near waterways.
Natural curiosity can cause people to get too close to these creatures, which can at times naturally frighten the animal, in many cases causing injury to these birds and even death.
So I'm hoping that people will respect that, give them space, not crowd them. You know, we can enjoy them from a distance, but it must be a relationship of respect and not getting too close to them.
People manage to observe them properly without infringing upon them. You know, I know a lot of people like to think of themselves as naturalists, but in truth, you have to be really delicate with any animals, but, you know, aviary in particular.
Just 9 years ago, bald eagles were listed as endangered in Massachusetts. Now, they're listed as a creature of special concern. Still, as the national symbol, federal and state governments are maintaining strict regulations to help preserve and protect this once endangered species.
As of 2018, there were nearly 80 territorial pairs of bald eagles identified in the Bay State. 56 years ago this week, musical history was made and pop music would never be the same. The Beatles made their debut on the then very popular Ed Sullivan Show on February 9th, 1964.
And to commemorate this historic anniversary, the Regent Theatre will feature a one-of-a-kind show called Here, There, and Everywhere, The Beatles in the USA. ACMi's news director Jeff Barnt gives us a preview.
The show here at the Regent on February the 8th is called Here, There, and Everywhere, The Beatles in the USA. It stars Eric Taros, who's a famed Beatles archivist, and also Chachi LaPrette, who was the radio host for Breakfast with the Beatles. Both men in this show will take people down memory lane to 1964, the Beatles' first tour through the USA. Now, we spoke to both men recently for our show Studio Nights at ACMi Studio A, and they told us not only did the Beatles inspire them, the Beatles helped shape both of their lives.
Roughly when I went into high school, I knew I wanted to be a DJ simply to meet and interview the Beatles, because I couldn't be a Beatle. There were already 4. Yeah. And I wanted to, and I heard the DJs and the TV guys interviewing them, and I'm like, I'd love to meet the Beatles. So I focused on becoming a DJ. And roughly, 1970, I started in high school. And I wanted to be a DJ when I turned on WBCN. Charles Laquadera, the two things that really made me do what I wanted to be in my life were the Beatles and WBCN radio. And so both of them kind of hit each other in the early 70s. And by 1981, I was blessed to be on WBCN, and I had a Beatles show by the mid-80s called Get Back to the Beatles, which became Breakfast with the Beatles. So that's how it all started with me.
Wow. And now, 2020, the Beatles split up 50 years ago, right?
50 years ago in April.
Yes.
Yeah. But the split up meant nothing in terms of the Beatles phenomenon, and here we are 50 years later. So
yeah.
How about you, Eric?
Me.
Your start as a Beatles.
Yeah. My start I was younger than Chach, but I had an older sister who sat us down as a family to watch the first Ed Sullivan show. My biggest memory of that is actually I was really into Bonanza, as I loved horses. I was little, and I'm like, I don't want to. Come on, I want. I was probably having a temper tantrum. Anyway, but that all went away the second I saw these guys, and it was mesmerizing. I remember they all kind of looked the same, and the hair really, and their presentation, I think, really burned into the mind.
Again, the show is called Here, There, and Everywhere, The Beatles in the USA. It'll be coming to the Regent Theatre on February the 8th at 8 p.m. For more information, all you have to do is go to the Regent Theatre website, regenttheatre.com. Now, 6 years ago, I had the very unique opportunity of interviewing a TV broadcast journalist who actually had a chance to tour with the Beatles during the 1964 USA tour and interview them city to city. He actually flew with them a lot. His name is Larry Kane, and he was a TV news anchor in Philadelphia and New York City before retiring. Larry has a million stories to tell regarding the Beatles, and he considers his coverage of the 1964 Beatles tour to be among the highlights of his very distinguished and very lengthy TV career.
It was really an interesting time. In 1964, I greeted them at the Miami airport as a reporter.
Veteran broadcast journalist and author Larry Kane was a 21-year-old Miami radio reporter when he was sent to interview a pop band from Liverpool.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
That just hit America like a seismic wave.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you.
45% of America's population tuned into the Ed Sullivan Show to see the Beatles that February. A newsworthy story.
I'll pretend that I'm kissing.
But one Larry Kane was convinced would not last.
This group will be here in September and gone in November.
But once the young skeptic turned on his hefty recorder,
I have with me George Harrison. How you doing, George?
I'm very well, Larry, and how are you?
Fine. You glad to be back in America?
Yeah, it's great.
I was amazed at their aplomb, at their savvy, how they handled the press.
Could you please sing something?
No! Sorry. Next question.
You can sing.
No, we need money first.
the Beatles fancied Kane's company and allowed him to tour with the band in 1964 and 65. The reluctant reporter was now inside the Beatles' inner circle.
They were all virtually in the middle of a Fellini film. I don't know if anybody will understand that today, but their life was R-rated, X-rated.
Hello, this is Larry Kane, one of 3 broadcasters traveling with the Beatles. At this moment, we're flying across the American Midwest. We're right over Kansas, about 23,000 feet in the air.
And at 23,000 feet, the Beatles got a little help from their friend.
Well, I did help them with one song. Never got paid for it. On 8 days a week, I told them to slow down the beginning of it. They played it for me on the plane. And they said, what do you think? I said, you're asking me. Yeah, I said, just make it slow. And they did it.
Larry Kane traveled with this affable supergroup from coast to coast for nearly 2 years, but his historic tapes reveal 4 very dissimilar personalities, especially among the unstoppable writing team of John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
With me is John Lennon. John, how are you again?
I'm fine, Larry. How's yourself?
Absolutely my favorite. A man who said in public what he thought in private.
Paul McCartney, how are you?
Well, Larry Kane, good to see you.
He never met a mirror, a comb, or an audience he didn't like.
There were bells on a hill, but I never heard them ringing.
The truth of the matter is, we now understand them, in our lives anyway, as the greatest musical influence ever.
2, 3, da 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 da.
The Beatles were the perfect elixir for a country starving for change. The U.S. just lost its new frontier in Dallas, Texas. A half a world away, Vietnam was heating up. And the Beatles' creativity would evolve with the inconceivable turbulence of the 60s.
When I say that song,
And everybody's saying, well, the Beatles were really sort of the medicine that we needed to cheer us up.
It seemed the only visionary who could see well beyond the horizon was the band's manager, Brian Epstein.
Brian Epstein told me on the plane in 1964, and when he said this, I thought he was just a dreamer. Okay? And he said, Larry, the children of the 21st century will be listening to the Beatles. And here we are.
It was 50 years ago today.
This music as a body of work is unprecedented.
John Lennon, thank you very, very much. This is Larry Kane. Thank you again.
Thank you, Larry, and God bless you. Jolly good.
Well, ever since I interviewed Larry Kane, it's now 56 years ago today, and the Beatles obviously are more popular than ever. Do you need proof? The #1 best-selling vinyl LP in 2019 worldwide, Abbey Road, an album that was released a half-century ago. Ouch. For ACMi News, I'm Jeff Barnes.
One of ACMi's premier volunteers just returned from a fascinating journey which took him to the other side of the planet, Vietnam to be exact. Rodrigo de Sousa recently traveled to Ho Chi Minh City, camera in hand, to capture the sights and sounds of this vibrant and colorful ancient Far East land. He's currently piecing together a music video here at ACMi, but here now is a short montage and a fascinating look at what Rodrigo captured in the age-old shops, restaurants, streets, and bustling marketplaces of Ho Chi Minh City. I had a chance myself to go to Ho Chi Minh City earlier this year, and I have to say Rodrigo captured the spirit of it beautifully. He's involved in several ventures here at ACMi, helping out with special projects, public affairs, and even in our control room right now for this weekly newscast. And we are lucky to have him. If you'd be interested in putting together your own project, go to our website at acmi.tv or stop by our Studio A at 85 Park Ave. We'd be happy to make your vision come true.
Well, what is the only food that has an eternal shelf life? Who wrote The Tale of Two Cities? What was the captain's name on the Titanic?
Just some questions that Arlington high schoolers may have to answer that will test their gray matter on WGBH's High School Quiz Show. The team recorded their segment this weekend, and our cameras captured the pregame run-up. It's the public television station's 11th season of this part Jeopardy, part Family Feud style show, and the second time AHS has made it this far. It's one of 17 high school teams taking part in the elimination rounds. The students say they have a lot of fun quizzing one another, and each has their own mix of knowledge from geography, literature, and physics to random trivia.
I've always known things, random things, and I never thought it would be put to use. Usually it's only good for use when I'm facing golf against my family during family day night. So I really thought it was fun to apply myself.
Capital Fiji. Suva.
Burkina
Faso.
Ouagadougou.
Latin teacher Ed Foley has been a longtime coach for these competitions since the show began. We'll have more on their winning formula in next week's newscast, and you can see for yourself how the team does on Saturday, February 15th at 6 p.m. on WGBH Channel 2. And oh yeah, the food with an eternal shelf life? Honey. Who wrote The Tale of Two Cities? Charles Dickens. And Titanic's captain? Edward Smith, whose last word, apparently, was reportedly, oopsie. There are many activities taking place at Arlington High School in the new year in the midst of the winter season.
We have all your Arlington High School action. Let's turn it over to Studio B.
Welcome to the Ponder Scope, your Arlington High School news, updates, and more. As the month turns over to February, we inch closer and closer to the official start of the high school rebuild. Before any work begins, there will be another major building forum for the entire Arlington community. On Tuesday, February 4th at 7 p.m., the Arlington Building Committee and project partners will meet to discuss the project in detail in the Lowe Auditorium. Make sure to drop by the event in order to get a better overall picture of what to expect in these first 3 to 6 months of work. Looking for an interesting independent study course? Then be sure to check out the latest offering on gender studies and participatory action research. In this 9-week course, you will work to better understand how gender-expansive, transgender, and non-conforming students experience education while simultaneously developing strong research and data analysis skills. If this sounds like an interesting course to you, make sure to contact Sam Hoyo at shoyo@arlington.k12.ma.us. Yet another travel opportunity. The annual exchange trip with our sister city in Nagaoka-kyo, Japan will take place this summer from July 4th to 14th. The trip will involve a variety of fun activities and excursions, including visits to ancient cities and local schools. If you're at all interested, be sure to reach out to Mr. Barassa and/or Mrs. Miller for more details. This is a general reminder to all athletes that registration for spring sports will officially open on Monday, February 3rd. In order to properly register, make sure to follow all necessary steps on Family ID. We wish the best of luck to all winter athletes as they finish up their seasons. Speaking of winter sports, how are our Spy Ponders doing, Nick?
Well, Sam, with only a handful of games left in the winter season, it's going to be interesting to see how our Spy Ponders can make a push for the playoffs. Basketball hosted Lexington on Friday night. The girls came away with a close 49-41 win, while the boys gave it all the fight that they had. They went into double overtime and would have gone to triple overtime had it not been for the final buzzer beater of Lexington's Michael Alessandro.
Natherman goes deep. They get it to Schrader, to Graff. Alessandro for the three at the buzzer to win it. Ball game, he does. Wow. Michael Alessandro hits the big three-point shot at the buzzer, and the Minutemen win 67-64.
Earlier this week, they took on Wilmington, with the boys taking the win on the road and the girls taking a loss at home. They'll both be on the road in Winchester for a Friday night doubleheader, but you can find the boys back on home court on Tuesday, February 4th at 6 p.m. Spy Ponder hockey is coming home with some big wins this week. Both teams comfortably taking down Burlington over the weekend, and a whopping 5-0 win for our boys against Stoneham on the road. They'll host Reading Memorial for an exciting doubleheader matchup on Saturday at the Eddie Burns Arena. The wrestling team is also having a good week, coming off a recent win against Winchester on the road. They'll be back in the pit on Friday at 4:30 to host Essex North Technical in Tingsboro. That's all for this week's edition of Sports Update as we inch closer and closer to the playoffs. I'm Nick Antonakis. Back to you at Studio A.
Thanks, guys. Tonight, before we sign off, we want to congratulate our Assistant News Director, Brenda Mahoney, for being nominated for a Mass Access Mass Creator Award for her reporting in Arlington in 2019. Mass Access created this award to recognize the best that the creative community in Massachusetts has to offer. Here's Brenda posing with our illustrious production and media manager, Katie Chang. Again, Brenda, congratulations for being nominated from all of us here at ACMi. Don't forget to stay with us for all your latest news and sports updates. And that'll do it for ACMi News. I'm James Milan.
And I'm Animo Osmani. Thanks so much for joining us from Studio A. We'll see you next week.
You can always check out our latest segments and newscasts on the web at acmi.tv/news. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ACMi News. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. You'll find us at youtube.com/ACMi News. If you have any news tips for us or wish to become a citizen journalist, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at news@acmi.tv or stop by ACMi Studio A at 85 Park Avenue.